Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining me for another episode of the Horses Advocate podcast. This is Doc T, Geoff Tucker, DVM. And today I want to talk about equine dentistry that's being motivated a little bit out of frustration and a little bit out of just knowing that there's so much going on in dentistry for horses that is, trying to advance the science, but it's not really doing that well. I think that there are some really good people out there working hard to make the horses' lives better in the horse's mouth, specifically their teeth. But I think that there's a lot of things being missed as well. And my frustration comes out as I hear several veterinarians, my colleagues, say that I can't get the back teeth because I don't use a speculum. I miss pathology because I don't use a light source and visualize these things. And I can understand why they say this for two reasons. One, it's logical. You want the horse absolutely motionless. You want the mouth completely wide open with a powerful light source so you can look inside and see all the pathology that could be going on in your horse's mouth. It makes sense. But just because we see it with our eyes doesn't mean that we can't see it other ways. Anybody who's got a deficit in a sensory organ, such as their eyes, if they have limited vision or if they can't see at all, can compensate using other senses. And because we didn't have all this fancy equipment back in 1983 when I was introduced to looking at horses' teeth, I was trained to use my fingertips to feel. And over the years, I can feel just about everything your eyes can see. Now, this sounds really hard because people just can't believe that I can stick my hand in a horse's mouth all the way to the very back tooth. And I get that. It's scary. These horses can crush your fingers off. They can bite you. They can rear up. They can strike you. They can do all these things while you're trying to perform dentistry the old-fashioned way. So most people don't want that to happen. They would prefer to medicate the horse using strong sedatives. So it's basically getting the horse drunk so the horse becomes compliant. Unfortunately, I've gone over this multiple times in other podcasts. It's not making the horse compliant through sedation, but making them comfortable through pain medication. And once comfortable, they can allow for the exam to occur. And if you find yourself using medications a lot in horses, I would prefer you to use a painkiller because that's what's causing the objections to most horses. By the way, the only other thing that I can guarantee will cause an objection from a horse is opening the mouth up too wide in a halter that's too small around the nose band, and they come up short and the halter presses on their lower jaw and they'll tend to rear up. They just don't like that. So make sure your halter fits right. And then if you have to use medications, try pain medications rather than just overt sedation. And you'll find a lot more compliance out of these animals, no different than you going to the dentist. And he says, here, drink some whiskey, rather than saying, here, let me kill the pain. It's just that clear in horses. But that's not why I'm coming to you today. I have a person who reported to me that their veterinarian doesn't believe I can get the very last upper cheek teeth or any of the last cheek teeth, upper or lower, by just using hand floats and a speculum. And I just laugh because instead of asking better questions or any questions at all, like how is it possible? People have been trained and have developed a belief system based on trusted sources, for instance, professors at veterinary colleges, who will say that you can't get the back teeth unless you sedate them. But Nobody, no vet school has ever called me up and say, gee, Dr. Tucker, you've only done 75,000 horses, and it seems like people keep coming back to you because you fix things. Maybe you'd like to come here and explain what you do, and let's do a test. Let's float some horses' teeth and then examine them and see if it is possible. Because I know I do this every day, and I do get the very last upper cheek teeth, and more importantly, the very last lower cheek teeth. That gives more pain relief to horses instantly than almost anything on the planet. This is why I always go for the very last lower cheek teeth first before I even touch the uppers. And that took me 10 or 15 or 20 years to figure that one out. But once I realized that when you put a bit in the horse's mouth and you press that tongue back against its lower bottom cheek teeth, oh my gosh, that really hurts a lot of horses. And they're constantly trying to throw their tongue out of their mouth over the bit, doing whatever they can to get away from that pain. And I've taken horses with eyes bugged out, head, almost higher than my body, scared to death. And I just take off the bottom last right cheek tooth. That's just one side, and just the bottom side of that's one side. And the horses they just stop. They move their tongue. They lower their head so the neck, instead of being, upright, it becomes parallel to the ground, and even can lower themselves so that the head is now getting down toward their knees, as if they've been medicated, because they're in absolute disbelief that the pain is gone. And I do this every day. I mean, day after day after day after day after day, I do this. And it's so obvious to me that the number one problem with horses is the pain caused by the sharp teeth digging into their tongue or into their cheeks. And once you get rid of that sharp pain, these horses become so compliant, so grateful, so thankful. It in itself becomes addicting. But this week, I went out to see a 32-year-old horse. And this horse, I've been floating teeth for a long time. And the chief complaint was that the horse was starting to bawl of pain and spit it out. And we'd had this horse on a once-a-year schedule due to its age, and the teeth were in pretty good shape. But like the lead inside a mechanical pencil, if you keep using the pencil long enough and you click out more lead, at some point there's no more lead left in the pencil. And the same thing happens in horses' cheek teeth. They use it and they keep ejecting out new material until they run out of material. And it's what I call an end-stage tooth. And this horse had an end-stage tooth, and it was an unusual one. It was the very last upper left cheek tooth, whatever. And it was also broken in two pieces. And I was able to stick my hand in back there. And yes, it was uncomfortable for the horse. There's a little bit of pain associated with this. And it dug itself a hole into the cheek. And we weren't at 12 months, we were at 11 months. So they had called me out earlier on this horse. And my fingers were almost strong enough to pop this thing out of the gums just using my fingers. But it needed a little bit extra. So I had a pair of forceps, what are called cap removers. And cap removers are good for the first 3 cheek teeth in the horse's mouth. And I had to send these all the way back to the very last upper left cheek tooth. Now, most of you listening to this have never worked on a horse, can't possibly imagine. But try imagining picking up a broom in each hand. So you have 2 brooms, and you're holding on to the very end of the broom. So the brush end is way out there, and you're on the very end of the handle in each hand, and you're trying to pick something up by getting the brush ends to pick up something. It doesn't have to be heavy, just light, but you have to try to make that happen with your arms extended. And you can imagine how hard it is to send in the short tool all the way inside the horse's mouth. And I'm holding on to the very end. And I have to, in my mind's eye, understand where the last cheek tooth is, and then close the forceps on this piece of tooth and pull it out. And because I've done this so often, I was able to catch it the first time and easily extracted the first large piece. And the horse was like, oh my gosh, thank you so much. It's been bothering me for a while. Thanks for taking this out of here. In fact, we had noticed that it was starting to get loose the year before, and we were going to keep our eye on it and wait until this moment came, because there's no sense in trying to extract a tooth too early. You wanted to mature so there's no hole left between the tooth and the sinuses. And that happens as the tooth granulates in. So this is going actually as planned. And then I had to go back and get the smaller piece out. And that took me 2 attempts. So in 3 attempts, I got the 2 pieces out on the very last upper left cheek tooth, the one that everyone says, I can't reach, I can't find, I can't take care of properly. And I was able to take that piece out, and the horse is so grateful. And by the way, these end stage teeth, almost as a rule, aren't painful. Especially this guy, he just had a really high threshold of pain and braced himself and knew that I was helping him. So I was able to take these 2 pieces out without any medication. The horse went right back to eating. The owner was so thrilled. There's no more chewing and balling up hay, and the horse is doing great. So for those people who say, I can't get the very back cheek teeth, well, I wish they had been there and seen what I'd just done. The other thing happened was there were some things, articles that came out. And let's see, I'm going to try to find one of them. One is called Composite Dental Fillings Can Fix Horses' Cavities. And this was in The Horse magazine. And The Horse is the mouthpiece magazine for the American Association of Equine Practitioners. And it's usually not a veterinarian who writes these articles, but somebody who does a synopsis of it. And whenever you get that happening, you sometimes miss some things. And I thought it was pretty interesting because it starts off by saying horses can develop cavities in their teeth due to a developmental abnormality that creates holes in the infundibula of their upper molars. These holes can remain invisible and unproblematic for years, but as horses' teeth continue to erupt over their lifetimes, and as the older tooth surface wears away, these holes can become infected, creating infundibular caries and structurally weaken the tooth. So at the very end, they had the link to the actual paper, and I love finding these papers. And it was called a long-term follow-up of restorations of equine cheek teeth infundibula, 2006 to 2017, by Christopher J. Pierce, Nikki Brooks, and it was published in the Frontier of Veterinary Science. And what really impressed me about this was the 40 some odd, let me get you the accurate count. 41 references that they put in here, which I thought was just really good. I mean, anything that is willing to put in that many references is really good. But it didn't touch on exactly what was going on here. So I want you to hop in your time machine, come back with me to, I think it was the year 2000. It was before 9/11. And a lot of us, that were around when the Twin Towers in New York City were hit, we tend to put our lives as either before that or after that. It was before that. I was up in Ocala, Florida, and our veterinary group, I'm going to say it was 1999, invited this non-veterinarian to come in. He was the be-all and end-all equine dentist. All the equine dentists in Florida thought he was the guru. He was president of the International Association of Equine Dentistry, the IAED, and he gave us an hour-plus long lecture on how to fill dental caries in horses. And I'll never forget, I was just listening to this guy and saying, this guy is the biggest con artist out there. But what really got me going was he says, you can extend the life of this horse, of all horses, by 5 years if you start filling their cavities. And I almost jumped up and said, are you freaking kidding me? I mean, number one, where's the proof? Where's the science behind this? And how long are you extending their lives? I mean, I've yet to see a horse drop dead because it had a broken tooth that fractured off from a dental carie. Just haven't seen it. And you can search and scour everything you want. I doubt if you'll ever find a case report where a horse broke a tooth and it led to the demise of the horse. If you can, please let me know. It'll be, the first horse or number one. And there are how many millions of horses out there? Horses' teeth tend to fracture a lot these days. I think back in 1984, when I graduated from Cornell, there was very little written about this. I was interested to see a 1939 reference in these list of references, which I thought was fascinating. So I don't think it was unheard of before 1984. But in my veterinary training, we didn't spend any time on fractured teeth in the horse. It just wasn't there. I mean, it just wasn't. And now it seems like I see at least one or two of these a week. It's just so common. And nobody's willing to put forward the reason why, except this author, Christopher Pierce and Nikki Brooks, did reference the fact that in the development of the tooth, there is a defect. And let me see if I can find this. Whoops, it's not there. Let's see. I can't find it. I was ready to read this to you, and I can't find it. Let's see what it said in the horse. Maybe it was in the horse that I read that. Here it is. It was in the horse. In the article, it says, in young horses, upper teeth grow the outer walls first and then fill with a dental material known as cementum. For reasons yet to be determined, some horses lack cementum in their upper cheek teeth, especially in the first cheek teeth to erupt. Now, I don't know what that means, the first cheek teeth to erupt. But anyway, leaving an empty space, usually deep inside the tooth. This gives the appearance of a solid tooth, even though it's somewhat hollow. I found that pretty interesting. And in the references, they talked about electron microscopy and that they're finding these things. Computed tomography and pathology study of equine cheek teeth infundibular caries. There's from the University of Edinburgh. Edinburgh is the home of Dr. Patty Dixon, who does more work on dental things in horses, especially their teeth, than anybody on the planet. He is the be-all and end-all of horse teeth. And I love listening to him, but I end up asking more questions every time I listen or read something he's got. And for instance, in this, I have an alternative hypothesis, and that is dental caries in humans is usually due to a disruption of the normal microbiome of the mouth. Back in 1932, I know that some dentists were studying caries in children. They were running, they were getting so many cases of cavities in these children, and they wanted to know why. So they looked at them and they determined that their morning meal of oatmeal was at the root cause of it. And that there was they didn't say a lectin, they didn't know about lectins then, but those are those plant proteins that you get in the outer shell and why grains are so inflammatory to so many people. Or it could be the sugar and the starch that kind of sticks in there, how sticky oatmeal can be, or a combination of both. But it could be a possibility that the microbiome of the mouth caused a change in the pH, which led to the decay. I remember, back in the 90s, my dentist said, if you want to stop having cavities, doc, you got to stop eating sugar. That's what he said. That was in the mid-1990s. And we also know that Texas A&M did a study on the effects of one dose of Previcox on the microbiome of the horse's mouth. And one dose of Previcox wiped out a whole family of bacteria. So if we have grains and we have this anti-inflammatory being added to grains, we're doing the double whammy. Could that possibly be at the root cause? Is it truly a deformity of cementum in the tooth, or are some of these cavities just wearing away like in humans, just a cavity that goes down what we call the pulp chamber and causing this thing to break open and to fracture teeth? I don't know. I don't think the jury's out. I don't think anybody's actually done any cause and effect studies. I think it's a pretty interesting concept that they see with their electron micrographs or their computed tomography or whatever it is that they look at these teeth and they see these things. I get it, but who's studying the pH of the horse's mouth and how grain affects it, and whether dental caries are ever seen in what we call quote unquote wild horses that are only on pasture and that's it. They never see any grain. Do we ever see dental cavities in those horses? I'd love to see that study. Maybe I'm just not looking that hard. I tend to have my ear to the ground listening for some of these articles, and I just don't see it. In the big list of 41 references in this article, this journal article, I don't see a lot of things in here. Yeah, I'm scanning right now. And it's interesting. There's a lot of review of equine dental disorders and lack of cementum infundibulum, hypocementosis in equine cheek teeth. That was in 2018. There's a lot of good studies in here. Epidemiological, pathological, and microbiological study of equine dental caries. I definitely need to read that one. But to me, why do we have no dental caries in the 80s, or very, very few? Then all of a sudden we have lots of them with fractured cheek teeth. And that's what bugs me. I need to dig down deeper and figure this one out. Somebody needs to. And of course, if you have a spare couple $1 million hanging around, let's get together and let's find some researchers who are willing to do this research so we can put an end to some of these confusing things. Because if my belief that the gut microbiome in the mouth is that important and is the leading cause of fractures of cheek teeth and dental caries, then we need to know it for sure. And we need to know if grain is causing equine odontoclastic tooth resorption and hypercementosis, also known as EOTRH, of the incisors and canines. We need to know this. We can't just be guessing. I'm guessing. Almost everybody is guessing, and they're trying to get some of this information out there. But it's hard to do. It's expensive to raise a horse, to keep a horse, to have a large enough number of horses that we can get some reasonably good data out of it. It's very hard to do. So I think there's a lot of good people out there doing the best they can. But to me, above all, we have to look at how is this affecting the horse? And I first thing I think of is, can we prevent it by just treating the horse like a horse? Number one. Number two, so what if they have dental caries? You and I, if we have a cavity in our mouth, it becomes painful. But those are human teeth. When we look at horse teeth, they don't seem to become painful. I don't get to see a horse with a toothache. It just doesn't happen. I see horses that split their tooth off and rub into their cheek or gum or their tongue, and those horses become painful. Sharp points become painful in the soft tissues. But I've yet to see a horse that's actually got a toothache. There can be disease around the tooth, inflamed gums that can lead to pain, no doubt about it. But a lot of these cheek tooth fractures that are split in two, the owner says, no, the horse is going great on the bit, has no problems chewing. This is just a routine float and it's an incidental finding. That's the most common way that this comes to us. So if it's not painful to the horse, why are we spending the money and time filling these cavities? That's the bottom line. I mean, I think it's great that they did this study. And the study said between 2006 and 2012, the colleagues followed the progress of 92 horses with an average age of 14 at the time of treatment, with 223 cheek teeth fillings. So 92 horses out of the millions that are out there, what's the percentage of horses that actually get these dental caries? And if they are a defect in formation, are we now going to look at all horses and look to see if there's a defect in the cementum formation or not? And if we do, can we predict that they're going to have these dental caries or not? I don't know. But between 2006 and 2012, they found 92 horses that had gone through this procedure where they had rosin filling, and they wanted to know if there was a successful outcome. So they found that even up to 11 years later, 99% of the treated horses, all with at least a 5-year history of fillings, experienced no adverse effects or abnormalities as a result of the fillings. Nearly 85% of the fillings were fully intact with a wear rate similar to that of the surrounding tooth. Fantastic. So now we've got a handful of horses out of the millions that are here, at least in America, and tens of millions, if not close to 100 million horses, asses, and mules throughout the world that are not having a problem with this. So when I see this decay, I don't see it with my eyes. I can feel it with my fingers. I just note that it's there. I say, okay, so we've got this, what I call central necrosis. So the middle of the tooth is going away and we get a nice thin outer edge. And I say, this tooth is either going to fracture, it's not. We're just going to take the file and make sure the edges are smooth, and we watch them. And if it does fracture, then I take the piece out, and the horse barely skips a meal. I mean, it's not like this is life-threatening or it's going to cause a problem in the bit. The only time it causes a problem in the bit is if the fractured tooth displaces into the tongue or the cheek. And I've got plenty of those. And I go in there and I just, take the forceps, get on top of it, maybe some painkillers, and out it comes. And I leave the rest of the tooth there, and it never bothers the horse again. It's like such a low incidence. And of those that are affected, it's such a low priority in their pain and in their suffering that it barely registers. So I think it's great that they're doing all this this work. I think it's wonderful. But I know that this charlatan back in 1999 telling us how to fill cavities was a loony bird. He subsequently was discredited when he became the head of the dentistry department of University of California at Davis. That's part of their history they don't really want you to know about. But I talked to the owner who actually was affected by this man, who sent out a private investigator on the guy. Who just took him to court. UC Davis fired him immediately, and the people who hired him and rebuilt their whole dentistry arm out there based on this this guy who's talked to me in 1999 to us veterinarians here in Ocala. And I was glad to see it happen because it's wrong. And then I'd say around 2005, 2010, I can't remember, maybe, yeah, it's close to 2010, 2012, the AAP came out and said that filling cavities in horses is not effective. It's not worth doing. It's a moot point. There's no benefit to filling cavities in horses' teeth. And yet here, this publication comes out in 2022, January 14th of 2022, saying that their retrospective study is showing 85% they're doing fine. And that's fine. If you want to do that, the takeaway message is there's no downside to it. They seem to work just fine. Their main limitations, and that's a section that they're now putting in papers where they're trying to show the weaknesses of their studies. So I'll just read that. It says, there are no case controls in the study, and therefore it is not clear if restoration of equine infundibula is a consistently beneficial procedure or at which grade of caries progression restoration should be performed for optimum benefit. The procedures were not re-examined at consistent regular times, creating some difficulties in standardizing the results. Re-examinations of treated horses did not consistently include radiograph or computed tomography, and therefore some apical changes may have occurred in treated teeth without visual oroscope or external clinical signs. I think it's brilliant. I mean, these guys are being absolutely transparent. They say, look, we're just throwing out some information here that might be of interest. It could lead to some more work to try and figure out what's going on. But I think there's a lot of flaws. And their conclusion is restoration of equine infundibula using materials developed for human dentistry, including flowable rosin composites, is a safe and long-lasting procedure and appears to prevent the development of further pathological changes, including apical infection and dental fracture. Notice the word appears to prevent. There's no proof, there's no cause and results here. But what's fascinating is if you flip over to the article in The Horse, it's basically saying, the title says it all, composite dental fillings can fix horses' cavities. So it says rosin fillings used in human dentistry can offer long-term solutions preventing, managing infundibular caries. So now you guys are reading this article and you're running out to your local vet or dentist or both and saying, I need you to check to see if there's infundibular caries. And I need you to fill these things because I don't want anything bad to happen to my horse. And by golly, you get it done. And 10, 15 years from now, they come back and follow up and say, yep, it's still there. And nope, it never became a problem. But I'd like to take another horse with the same degree of infundibular caries and follow that horse with no treatment to see if that horse ever had a problem or not. We don't know. And then we have to look at, were they fed grain or not? Were there's just a forage-based diet, or did they have altered things? Were they put on an anti-inflammatory or any medication that could have affected the oral microbiome? So many questions. And yet here's another case of science that is that leads to non-validated results. And they admit this. You can't prove that this means anything. We're just showing that it's safe. And then the Horse magazine, which is lay magazine, coming out connecting the scientific material to you guys, the horse owner, and it says, yes, it's safe. And you should think about doing this because it can prevent further damage. And I'm like, there's no controlled studies. I mean, everybody's talking about follow the science. So it seems like with a pandemic, everyone says, follow the science. Well, there is no science here. That's the bottom line. So don't lose sleep over the fact that your horse may or may not be developing dental caries. Just start looking at what else could be going on and know that, I take fractured teeth out all the time and the horses are just fine. Speaking about some really interesting stuff, there was another study. This cracked me up. Oh, it was a study finds operator health risks with equine dental power tools. Now, this is a hoot. Now, I'm going to try and read this as it is and how it was reported. The lead author, Sam Vescovi, if I pronounce that correctly, of Vescovi Equine Vets, and I believe he's in, oh gosh, please don't holler at me, Australia or New Zealand. He was given a grant by the European Veterinary Dental College and the European Veterinary Dental Society to pay for the imaging analysis and cadaver fees. And that's really nice. Nice of them to do that. And this was just basically a study that took some cadaver heads and they just, put them on the table, and they took motorized equipment to drill or to do what they call odontoplasty, which is the, $5 word for the 2-penny word called floating teeth. And they basically floated the teeth, and then they set up a particle analysis to look at the particles that were generated. To be specific, It's called an analytical observational study. So basically, they set up something that could occur. But as they said in the main limitations, this was a simulated experiment. Does not take into account the variety of environments in which routine treatments take place. So they had a 15-minute routine motorized odontoplasty performed on cadaver heads with monitoring equipment placed 30 centimeters away. And there's about a foot, okay? Maybe a little bit more than a foot, away from the oral cavity to simulate the position of the operator's face. For quantitative analysis, an active air sampling photometric monitor was used to detect the concentration of fully respirable, which means greater than 4.25 micrometers, which is very small, particles produced. The use of a water and a non-water cooled equipment and two different types of face mask, standard surgical and an FFP3, which I think is equivalent to these N95s or K95s, were compared. An 8-stage Marple personal cascade impactor modeled the deposition of the particles in relation to the human respiratory tree. Qualitative analysis of these particles was performed using scanning electron microscopy and energy dispersive X-ray spectroscopy. So they just didn't look, they actually measured. And I love it, the fact that they measured these things. Now, the results, according to the paper, was motorized odontoplasty created aerosolized particles that could reach all levels of the human respiratory tree. These particles were composed mostly of calcium and phosphate, although traces of metals were found. I assume the metals were coming from the actual filing equipment. Anyway, the concentration of fully respirable particles exceeded the recommended exposure limits set by the health and safety executive. The use of an FFP-3 face mask significantly reduced the level of inhaled particles. And their conclusion was there are possible health risks performing a large amount of routine motorized dentistry due to inhalation of aerosolized particles. The use of an adequate face mask lowers exposure levels to within acceptable limits and therefore should be worn. So let me just take those last two sentences apart a little bit. Number one, there are possible health risks. All right. So what are the risks if you put this calcium and phosphate in large particles down the lungs? What risks are actually occurring? And it says, in performing a large amount of routine motorized dentistry. Well, what's a large amount? I mean, is it 1 horse a day? Is it 10 horses a day? You know, do you just, if you do it on Mondays and Fridays versus 7 days a week, what is a large amount? And is any amount bad? I mean, what happens to these particles once they get into the lungs? Are they walled off? Do they become granulomas, abscesses? Does it bring in bacteria that don't belong down there? Do our respiratory tree and anti-inflammatory effects and immune system attack these things and pull them out? What kinds of diseases are humans getting from this motorized tool use? So the question is, are they saying it's okay to use motorized tools? Or are they saying it's not? And the funniest part is, I'm sorry, I'm laughing. But the funniest part is when I tell people in my practice of this study, you know what the first question is that comes out of it? Everybody said to me, well, to heck with the operator. What about the horse? They're breathing it in. I mean, it's coming out and it's going right up their nostrils and into their lungs. Is there possible damage? Now, I got to tell you, motorized equipment has been around for a long time. And I'm not seeing an increased rate of lung disease, either in human operators or in horses using motorized equipment. But if you're going to put a face mask on the operator, well, I just found out a way that I could make $1 million. I'm going to make a face mask for the horses so they don't have to breathe this crap in. I'm just saying. I mean, where's the article that says we also did the same for horses to see if there's any problems there? Anyway, this has basically left us with more questions than answers. And the questions are, is this relevant? Is there any reason why we should stop using motorized equipment? Maybe this fella, Sam Biscobi, is trying to say to us, we have to reevaluate what we're doing here. We have to reevaluate if using motorized equipment has a health risk and if we need to be masked up to do it. And then I further read down how Wiley Online Library accepted his article, and it just kind of touches on the fact that everybody wants to write an article to get accepted, because when you get an accepted article, then you can say you're a published author. And if you're published, that adds more credibility. And I don't doubt it. Here I am. I'm podcasting. I'm publishing these things. I'm publishing lots of written stuff because I want to get my information out there. But the difference is we're trying to, what I'm trying to do here is open our eyes to the flaws of most scientific studies, to the one thing that has haunted me ever since I started reading scientific studies. And that is, if a study gives you more questions than they do answers, then how valid is that study? In other words, I understand that we need to know if there's particles being emitted that's coming out in this Sawzall thing, the motorized tool, the spinning disc, whatever. And, water cooled or not water cooled, are there aerosolized particles coming out? And if there are, can they reach the biggest, the deepest parts of our lungs? And this answers that. Yes, it can. All right. Now what? Now what do we do? Do we shut down motorized tools, completely say, no, it's no good because we can put a mask on, but we can't protect our horses? Is that the conclusion that I should be taking? Or should I be saying, yeah, but it doesn't seem to make a big difference. It just comes up the mucociliary apparatus and they snot it out and it's no big deal. I don't know. I know I don't have to worry about it using hand floating because I don't spin up a lot of dust. It all just kind of goos up in the saliva and they spit it out. Oh, but what if they're swallowing it? Well, when you've been doing horse's teeth for as long as I have and realize that no horse has a problem, then I don't worry about it too much. So that's it. 45 minutes of me pontificating about science and dentistry, showing you that I can reach to the very back and anybody can. I'm going to offer to this one veterinarian a chance to come to the veterinary school or the dentistry school that I put on and give it to her for free and say, come here, learn. And instead of throwing somebody under the bus with rhetoric that says, I can't get the back teeth, why don't you come here and learn from somebody who's doing it and see if it is possible? Now, it may not be for her. She may be too scared to put her hand far back in the horse's mouth. And I don't blame her. I mean, it's scary back there. You can lose your finger if you don't know what you're doing. There's no doubt about it. But if you're taught how to do it correctly and you practice it, it's not going to be bad. It's like anything else that has danger. Working with horses is a dangerous thing. But if you can stick your hand back there and feel each tooth and the horse lets you, and then you file it and get smooth and the horse says, thank you, go back and check. Yes, I got that spot. And they lower their head and put their forehead into your chest and just are like, don't leave me. Where have you been all my life type thing. That's really cool. And if you have to use medications a lot as you learn how to do this, then gradually wean yourself off. I mean, that's just perfect. That's what I like to do. So I think what I'm going to say is, if you're a veterinarian, listen to this, and your belief systems are rigid, meaning when it's hard for you to change what you think, you have to open up your mind. You have to understand that there are other possibilities out there. We don't know everything. And those who are taught you, you ask them, well, who taught them? And keep asking yourself, who taught them? And is there another possible way? All I know is that the clients who come to me and say, I've tried it with the power tools and I like this non-medicated hand floating, the horse seems to enjoy it better. I'm certainly more relaxed about it. And I got the results I've been trying to, get from my other dentists before. And now the horse is comfortable. He's relaxed on the bit. He's chewing better. Those are the things that's evidence to me. And if you're a veterinarian listening to this and you want to learn how to do this, call me or email me and say, I'm willing to do this. I'm going to commit, the time to learn it. I'm going to commit to coming to Florida and sitting in your car and going out and getting these horses done. At the worst case scenario, you can go away and say, it's not for you. At the best case scenario, you can go out now and say, I'm offering power equipment, but if you don't like power, I've got hand floating. I can do either one, whatever you'd like. It's going to increase the number of people who are going to use you in your veterinary practice. You aren't going to be worried about the hand floater who's stealing business from you. You're going to now be able to offer both of those. Or you could sponsor somebody, if it's legal in your state, to actually learn this so you can offer both. You'll have to pay that person to actually float the teeth, but that's how you get more business into your practice. And I know that keeping people in business and in the equine world is so important, with the attrition rate of equine veterinarians just exceeding the replacement rate. Just as a side note, I've become a mentor to young equine veterinarians to teach them how to think and how to survive in this world and try to keep the rate of loss to a minimum. Right now, 50% of all equine veterinarians quit equine veterinary medicine within the first 5 years of practice due to burnout or unmet expectations, or just abject overwork and not any time off. And these Generation X's or Generation Z's, I guess, and millennials who want this work-life balance are coming to grips with the fact that being a horse vet is almost a 24/7 occupation. And I'm trying to help those guys understand that this is a calling, this is a passion. I've been with this for a long time. And every time I walk into a stall, I did this morning, before I did this podcast, I went into a stall and worked on this young horse. And this thrill is still there. I mean, yesterday when I pulled out the fractured teeth, that old horse was so grateful. I've been working on that horse for 25 years. And the horse knew who I was, trusted me, got it done, and just was so grateful and so thankful. That's what this is all about. Being a veterinarian is to offer peace to these horses. So this is Doc T. Thank you again for joining me for the Horses Advocate podcast. Please let other people know about it. Consider joining thehorsesadvocate.com, become a member. This is where I have rounds. This is where you can actually contact me, talk to me, understand things. And again, last time here, if you're a veterinarian listening to this and want to learn more about helping horses thrive in a human world using horsemanship skills and alternatives to what you've been taught in vet school, not antagonistically, but synergistically, to make yourself a better horseman, to offer more to your horse clients, to become the leader in your horse community by offering some skills that they might not have taught you in vet school, please contact me. I would love to talk to you about that and see if we can get something going here. Hey everyone, Doc T here. Thank you for listening to my content. Would you do me a huge favor? Would you please subscribe, comment, like, thumbs up, and give a star review? However it's presented to you, I want you to do that. There's two reasons. The first, of course, is to improve this product. This way I know what you like, what you don't like, what I can improve upon, what topics you want me to cover. But more importantly, it's also going to help others find me. And by doing that, you are now engaged in this mission of helping horses thrive in a human world. By you helping, we can reach others. And that I would be so grateful for. And remember, go to thehorsesadvocate.com for updates on this information. Thehorsesadvocate.com. And again, thank you so much for being here. Doc T out.